All right, folks, thanks for bearing with us. We're going to get started now. First, we'd like to bring up Mario Cordero, Chief Executive Officer of the Port of Long Beach.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Before I begin, let me just acknowledge a few people here from the City of Long Beach, City Council Member, 5th District, Megan Kerr. Thank you so much for being here. As mentioned, I'm Mario Cordero, CEO of Port of Long Beach. And thank you for being here today with us as we introduce the port's new economic impact analysis. The study looks at jobs, tax revenues, gross domestic product generated by the ports, trade, and more. And that shouldn't be surprising to anybody in terms of the economic engine we have here in Long Beach, in the Port of Long Beach. The last report that we issued was back in 2019, pre-COVID. And that report was based on 2017 data. This report now brings it up to date and it basically examines year 2023, post-COVID. And the team is working on a report that will be released later this year. Now, post-2023, you are aware that the Port of Long Beach had record numbers in 2024. And all this just happens to come at a time when the two most powerful economic countries, the United States and China, are currently discussing this whole issue of trade tariff policy. The mayor will address that at a later point this morning. So the good news is the two parties are at the table discussing a more pragmatic approach. However, again, there are concerns with regard to this question, but we're going to really focus on the economic impact report that will be released by the Port of Long Beach. Joining our mayor, Rex Richardson, this morning, will be Harbor Commission President Bonnie Lowenthal, Gary Herrera, President of Local 13 of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, Tracy Hernandez of the Los Angeles County Business Federation, and Kimberly Ritter Martinez, the Ports Manager of Economics and Funding. And at this point, I would like to introduce our first speaker, someone who has a long history of supporting the Port of Long Beach, supporting international trade here in terms not only for the city, but for the region and the state and the nation for that matter. And of course, a big spokesperson for the citizens of Long Beach in terms of Long Beach not only being known as a port city, but really being known as a city that bring so much economic impacts to the state of California nationwide. So without further ado, Mayor Rex Richardson.
Right. Well, good morning and thank you, Mario. We are here today to celebrate and acknowledge this report that has fresh new data showing the past 5 years post-COVID, the economic impact of the Port of Long Beach. And I'm proud to be standing here today with a collection of leaders who really represent the broad section of industries that the port connects with. You've got everything from labor and longshoremen and teamsters and truckers and industry and shippers. Everything's here, construction workers, everything's here because the Port of Long Beach literally impacts every industry that you can think of. We're going to see a little bit of that in the presentation, and you'll be surprised by just how wide-reaching our economic impact is. 40% of goods move through the Port of Long Beach. U.S. Goods move through the Port of Long Beach. We're the nation's largest economic drivers. International trade is not just important to Long Beach, it's important to the entire, all 50 states in the United States of America. The Port of Long Beach plays a vital role in moving goods, fueling economic growth, and supporting jobs far beyond our city limits. We move more than $250 billion of economic value per year. A reduction in trade in our ports doesn't just affect dock workers, truckers, local businesses. It threatens American jobs and economic security all across our country. This new report makes it clear when trade slows here, the effects ripple across supply chains, industries, and communities nationwide. There's no denying it. We have now entered a space where there's heightened attention on tariffs. We will talk about that later, but I think what's important here is we understand just how impactful the Port of Long Beach is. And so what I want to do is we're gonna bring up Kimberly Ritter Martinez, and she's going to talk about the impact. High level, 2.7 million jobs across the United States are supported directly by the impact of the Port of Long Beach. And to walk you through that, let's welcome up Kimberly Ritter.
Hey, good morning. I'm going to take a few minutes to explain what economic impact modeling is and what it is that we're measuring. So economic impact analysis, it can be applied to a project, a policy, an industry, or in this case, the Port of Long Beach. And it's basically a method through which we can measure the port's impact on the wider economy. Now, it's a bit like dropping a stone into a pond. The activities here at the port, whether it's through our cargo operations, our capital expenditures, or our tourism activities, all of these ripple out across the region and then eventually reaching every corner of the United States. So how do we measure these effects as they spread out across the country? First, let's look at the types of economic impacts we estimate. We begin with the direct effects. These are the first source impacts that arise from the cargo handling, construction, and tourism jobs that are created here at the port. Next, we have the indirect effects. These happen through the purchases of goods and services used at the port. They include, for example, supply chain activity, equipment expenditures, construction materials, consulting services. These expenditures, in turn, support employment at the firms who provide them. And then finally, we have induced effects. When workers and business owners earn income from working at the port or as one of our suppliers, they spend those dollars on groceries, entertainment, travel, all those everyday necessities that we spend our paychecks on. And all of that activity supports the broader economy. Next, the economic metrics that we measure include employment, labor income, gross output, which is like a regional GDP figure. We measure economic output, which equates to business revenues, and then also fiscal impacts. These are the total federal, state, and local taxes paid by individuals and businesses. And then finally, we estimate all of these metrics and impacts across 4 geographies. So our report includes the Los Angeles MSA, which is LA and Orange counties, the 5-county region, which is LA, Orange County, Riverside, San Bernardino, and Ventura counties, the state of California as a whole, and then finally the US. So if we tie all of this together and we look at the total impact, employment impacts across these 4 geographies, they sum up to 543,000 jobs supported by the port in the LA MSA, nearly 692,000 in the 5-county region, over 1.1 million throughout the state of California, and in the US, over 2.7 million. Now, naturally, when we think of the port, we think of jobs and goods movement, but port-related activity supports employment in every major industry sector. So first, agriculture and extraction, 76,000 jobs. Construction and manufacturing, 133,000. Healthcare and education, 148,000. Grouping together other services, media, utilities, and government jobs, 248,000. Professional and financial services, 430,000. And then goods movement and warehousing, 432,000 jobs. Retail trade, 1.2 million across the US. All of that adding up to 2.7 million jobs supported by port activity in the United States. So before I hand things back to the mayor, I would like to acknowledge the contributions of Nando Guerra, our senior global economist, who was the lead on this project, and then also Port Planning Division's leadership, Teresa Doudno and Ian Conway. Thank you.
Very much. All right. So now that we've established this and we see just how impactful the Port of Long Beach has been, this is fresh data over the past 5 years. It's important for us to now acknowledge the moment they're in. There's no denying it. We've entered the reality of a new tariff era. While the administration has decided to reduce tariffs from 145% to 30% on China just this morning, let's be clear, what we need is certainty. There still will be a great deal of uncertainty for workforce and for buyers and suppliers. So we don't, we're not gonna celebrate right now that the crisis is over. This is still a crisis of our own making that we need to address through long-term, long-range, strategic, and stable policymaking. We know that there has been impacts. Just this morning, we held a roundtable with workers and business to understand the impacts of threat of tariffs and the damage. We're seeing the damage. The damage is done. We've seen ships that never sail. We have containers that sit empty. We have American businesses and consumers that are preparing and beginning to pay the price for these policies. The rollback is a step that should be acknowledged, but recovery will not be immediate. It will take weeks, if not months, to untangle the backlog and stabilize the system. That's why stable, long-range trade policies are essential for the success, not just for our local economy, but for our nation. The reality is these tariffs on imports from China are already showing real-world consequences, and nowhere that is more visible than right here in the city of Long Beach at the Port of Long Beach. And as these new policies take effect, we have timely and revealing economic analysis that underscore just how critical this port is, not only to our city or even to our state, but to our entire national economy and the economic well-being of the United States of America. So the data shows 2.7 million jobs across the United States are directly supported by trade that moves to the Port of Long Beach. These are jobs in warehousing and trucking, logistics, agriculture, manufacturing, retail, even education that move through the Port of Long Beach. These jobs are in warehousing. I mean, it's so much that we have, and it impacts nearly every state in the country. These jobs account for 176 billion in personal income, 300 billion in contributions to the national gross domestic product. These are not abstract numbers. These are American livelihoods. These are American families. These are American communities that rely on our port to remain competitive. The analysis was launched more than a year ago as part of our regular review of the port's economic impact, but arrives now at a very critical moment, giving us real hard data about what's at stake as we evaluate new trade policy and new tariffs that threaten to disrupt our long-term trade flows. So let me be clear, we support the goal of strengthening domestic manufacturing. We support the goal of American economic strength. We believe in the power of American-made goods. We believe that we are a port that is a gateway for United States imports from soybeans that head to Iowa to pork and beef from Texas, Colorado, Kansas, and beyond. But trade is a two-way street. The Port of Long Beach doesn't just serve the Southern California, it serves the American economy. It's a national asset. Any policy that disrupts the flow of trade here risks undermining the very economic growth it seeks to aim. Locally, our port is the foundation of Long Beach's identity and our prosperity. It supports tens of thousands of jobs in our city alone. It fuels industries across the region. Nationally, it connects U.S. products to global markets. It keeps our shelves stocked in every corner of our country. Long Beach is proud of the role that we play. We remain hopeful that for the sake of millions of American workers, decision makers in Washington realize what is truly at stake and work towards solutions that strengthen, not stall our economy. What we truly seek is stability. What we want to defeat is uncertainty. Uncertainty impacts our ability for workers to be able to keep a roof over their head and put food on their table. It threatens investment into our port, big infrastructure investment. It threatens our ability to continue to chart toward a zero emission economy. All of this depends on certainty, and uncertainty is at an all-time high right now here in our region. And so we encourage the administration to continue to focus on long-range, stable economic policy. Thank you, and I want to hand it back to Mario Cordero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So needless to say, you're hearing what a economic engine, not only the city of Long Beach is, but the Port of Long Beach. And if I could bring you back to the era of COVID-19, all eyes were on the West Coast, more specifically, the Port of Long Beach and the San Pedro Bay complex. And now in today's world, again, all eyes are on the West Coast. And there's a reason. And this is the reason we have now going to issue our economic report later this year. And you're understanding what what that data is and those statistics are. So without further ado, I'm now going to introduce to you the board president of the Port of Long Beach Commission, Bonnie Lowenthal, and that's the policymaking board. Bonnie?
Thank you so much, Mario. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being our #1 cheerleader always. And I know you've been in the past, you will be in the future, and that's so important to what we're talking about. I want to also thank all the partners that are here. We're all working together for the same goal. So today's message is extremely important. The cargo moving through the Port of Long Beach sustains jobs across the regions and throughout the United States, as you've heard. It spans a wide spectrum of industries, but the occupations go far beyond the docks. The jobs are in retail, online sales, warehousing, and transportation. They're also in agriculture, manufacturing, construction, finance, technology, and more. We're talking about 2.7 million jobs, providing $176 billion in income. We're helping to put America to work. We're proud of that. We want to maintain that. In fact, we want to grow. We can't emphasize enough the port's crucial role as an economic engine for the region, the state, and the country. And it's our job to keep that engine running smoothly. For example, we're investing $368 million in capital expenditures just this year, modernizing our infrastructure in the interest of efficiency and the environment. And that's not just a flash in the pan. It's a normal year for us. Over the next 10 years, we're planning $3.2 billion in capital improvements. The influence of the Port of Long Beach on the national economy is far-reaching, with 15% of all United States container cargo moved across our docks. In this analysis released today, we see why every American has a stake in what happens at the Port of Long Beach and how investments in an efficient and sustainable supply chain here in Long Beach can spread benefits to every corner of the country. As leaders of the port, we know that keeping the Port of Long Beach competitive, financially stable, and environmentally sustainable is what allows our partners in labor and industry to move so much cargo and to create so many jobs. Did you know, for example, that the U.S. Department of Agriculture lists the Port of Long Beach among the top 12 U.S. ports for waterborne export of agricultural products, such as soybeans, cotton, corn, and other commodities. It adds up to more than $8 billion annually in agricultural products. We can also see that various parts and materials imported at the Port of Long Beach are used by American manufacturers to make products that they can export to other countries. The Port of Long Beach and its partners, many of whom you see here today, remain dedicated to supporting the United States economy by keeping the goods moving reliably and efficiently, and we do it to support jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, President Lowenthal. So we've known from our previous economic reports that trade moving through the port generates jobs. And when we talk about the economy, there's two fundamental metrics that we're always looking to. Consumer spending, which makes up 2/3 of our economy, and jobs. So needless to say, when we talk about these figures of 2.7 million in the national supply chain and or 1.1 million in the state supply chain, is a significant number. And as President Lowenthal said, that this new study, that the 2.7 million jobs across the United States are supported by the trade when it comes to direct and indirect and induced jobs. But let's break this down further. And I'm talking about that number, 2.7 million. So if you take Orange County and Los Angeles together, that number breaks down to 543,000 jobs, which essentially is 1 out of 17 jobs in these two counties. Now, if you look to the Southern California region, which consists of 5 counties, that number is 691,000 jobs directly or indirectly from the Port of Long Beach. And as been referenced, when you look at the state, that number is 1.1 million. Now take a look at the state when we talk about the 1 million jobs that derive from the Port of Long Beach. If we have a 10% reduction in cargo, and it's a primary question we should ask ourselves today, if there's a 10% reduction in cargo, that means there will be a 10% reduction in jobs. That's a 6-figure number. 100,000 jobs are at stake if there's a 10% reduction in cargo. This year, the Port of Long Beach had 4 very, very strong months. Some of you may know that in the first quarter of 2025, Long Beach was or is the busiest container port in the United States. But we are starting to see now low cargo volumes for May, potentially 30% down. Now, again, the good news is there's discussions currently between the USA and China. So let's step back and see what happens. But the fact of the matter is uncertainty remains. And I think what this industry is calling for, that we have certainty and clarity with regard to what that tariff policy looks like in the mid and long term. Just to give you a context of the commodities that come through the Port of Long Beach, 20% of all refrigerators that come to the country come through the Port of Long Beach. Computers, smartphones in that same percentile, about 30% of microwaves, and 80% of televisions. So it gives you an insight of how important this complex is and this port is to the average American and the average consumer. So with significantly reduced cargo volumes, it's likely that the consumer will have fewer choices. And as we've indicated, this is why we are issuing this economic impact report or revision from the prior report. Again, to reemphasize how important this port is, not only to the city of Long Beach, the state of California, but the nation overall. We also have a crucial links to the international supply trade, and which, again, need to be carefully calculated. And we need to be deliberate in our policies. Because in the current environment, as you are aware, the headlines are, there's a lot of uncertainty. The markets fluctuate. The good news, the markets are up after the announcement of some progress on discussions, but nevertheless, uncertainty continues. As you have heard this morning from our subject matter expert, Kimberly. So with that, let me just now at this point, when we talk about jobs, I'm going to introduce the president of Local 13 IOW, Gary Herrera. And these are the men and women on the ground. Now, again, going back to the COVID era, they worked day in, day out during COVID. There was no break for them during this COVID crisis. And today, this is the job sector that we need to support. So if we get to a point where we don't have a worse scenario of our job reduction in this complex, it's not only good for the Port of Long Beach, good for the region, but good for the national economy. So Gary.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, my name is Gary Herrera. I am president of the International Longshore Warehouse Union, Local 13. We represent nearly 9,000 full-time workers, 6,000 part-time workers. I believe I'm also speaking on behalf of Local 63, our clerical union, and Local 94, our foreman walking boss, making a total of about 15,000 workers in total on the waterfront. You know, the men and women of the ILWU are not just workers on the waterfront. We represent the communities in which we're talking about. As we talk about less cargo, we also talk about less spending opportunity. 73% of our workforce live within 5 miles. 54% live within 10 miles. We are the community. We live and we work in our community. We live and we spend in our community. We're seeing cargo volumes drop to record lows, to the point where there's hundreds of jobs daily with less work opportunities afforded to the men and women in the ILWU. We are the frontliners. Once the cargo volumes drop, we're the first to see it. We're the first ones to go out and spend money. We have blue signs in our communities that state we support the ILWU and they support us because we are the community. So this job loss that we're seeing, the less amount of cargo volumes, it's impacting our workforce. The workforce that's impacting the most is our part-time workers. We talk about the uncertainty. The part-time workers that are seeking to get fully registered into the ILWU are now being forced to find other jobs. They're being forced to either not have jobs. Once you find another job or you go into a different industry, we may not see those workers again. We talked a little bit about COVID. When COVID came and the work came back so forcefully, the men and women of the ILWU worked 6.5 days a week. We didn't have a choice because we are the community, we are the economy. So it was imperative that we kept working and we kept those goods moving, whether it be for your medical needs, your TVs, whether it was agriculture, whatever you see fit to be part of your daily life, the men and women of the ILW are moving that cargo to and from your homes and into the stores, into your restaurants, to your pharmacies, to your hospitals. Everywhere you see, it starts right at the string right there with the men and women of the ILWU. So with that being said, even though we see the job loss and we are being impacted very heavily, we are going to be ready to come back and work just as tirelessly as we have during COVID. We're going to make sure that all of your goods for this economy, for our communities, is delivered in proper time, because that's what the men and women of the ILWU do, is we make sure we do it because we are on the front line. But the term uncertainty still creates an anxiety among our workforce, and we're hoping for some stability. We're hoping for some real numbers, some real agreements that are signed and dated and moving us forward, and not with pauses. So with that being said, thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the men and women of the ILWU, and we appreciate your support. And once again, we'll work tirelessly to make sure that all your goods are delivered to your front doors on a timely manner. Thank you.
Okay, so now you've heard the importance and the magnitude of the empirical data we're presenting. You've heard the importance about jobs in the employment sector and the impact on labor. So now we're going to move to the business sector, and I'm going to introduce someone who leads the Los Angeles County Business Federation, and they have been an association who've addressed the pertinent issues with regard to the business sector, because as mentioned before, there's a lot of uncertainty, not just with regard to employment, jobs, consumer spending, but in the business community. And all you have to do is look at the headlines day to day in Wall Street. So with that, I'm going to introduce now Tracy Hernandez of the Los Angeles County Business Federation. Tracy?
Thank you, Mario. Thank you, Mayor Rex. I want to say go beach, go jobs, go brothers and sisters standing here united today to shed light on this important topic that's impacting all of us every day. So at LA County Business Federation, we're a grassroots network of 245 different business groups and associations. 3 of my colleagues are here today from the Harbor Trucker Association, the Long Beach Economic Partnership, and the Pacific Merchant Shipping Association. All of our groups in total, we have 400,000 employers just in Southern California, 5 million jobs. So you can imagine that the statistics that the Port of Long Beach is giving us today and the words that the Mayor Rex is championing about certainty and the importance of our port resonates. I won't repeat what has been said by many others here, but I will call your attention to an aspect that hasn't yet been mentioned. The mighty Port of Long Beach and all its tentacles and all its jobs and economic input also comes full circle around, and I see our council member here, into paying taxes. And paying taxes fuels everything we want in our hometowns, our cities and our neighborhoods, our city budgets. So we can have clean and safe streets and productive parks and clean water and reliable lights, good schools, everything that we care about. And I learned this morning, and thank you for the great port analysis, $84.5 billion in taxes are put into our whole government ecosystem to provide the basic services that we all require and need to raise our families, invest in our businesses here. So we don't want to lose light on that, or lose sight of that. And I'll just share one other item. We just are releasing our poll. We poll all those hundreds of thousands of businesses, and we do it every single year. And then we benchmark where those employers are at, every size, whether you employ 2 people, 200, 200,000 people. And what's on your mind, what's most pressing in its concern and nature. And as Mayor Rex and Mario have said, this uncertainty piece, which is, first I'll tell you, it's been the highest it's been in 16 years of our polling. So what does that mean? So uncertainty means you hold on, right? So you have your businesses, you have investment, you're investing in people and competition and your goods and services you're manufacturing. So you hold on and you sit tight and you hold your breath, and then you stop being as bold in your calculations. So it is very serious, and that's how it affects us here. The other thing I'll tell you that came out is we do people who employ 50 or fewer people, or 51 or more people. And it was quite a big difference in what they designated as their most impactful items. And I'll tell you, people who employ under 50 people are the most impacted by the cost of doing business, cost of getting capital, cost of expanding our workforce, cost of buying more properties and manufacturing plants and so on. And so the sensitivity around where we're at today, I think Mayor Rex said we're in a moment. So we need to own that moment. And then those of us that are coming, I appreciate the positive nature of the data that's been put forth here. And it's upon us and our labor friends and workers and everyone. I heard in the roundtable this morning that everyone's ready to go to work. Everyone's ready to deal with the surge. Everyone's ready to get back to some stable nature. And we're here to help and support. I couldn't be happier to be a part of what everyone is doing here. We'll continue to ring the bell, raise the alarm, and speak hope and positive reaction. So thanks for having us today.
Thank you, Tracy. And you sure ended it with a lot of energy here as we conclude our commentary and get ready for the Q&A, any questions you may have. I do want to say again, as Tracy has emphasized, we're ready. We're ready for the challenges, but more importantly, we're ready to keep moving this agenda to not only indicate to everyone how important this port complex is, the Port of Long Beach, but together how we continue to be the economic engine, not only for the city, but for the USA. So with that, in addition to the reporters who are here, let me just say that those reporters who may be on Zoom could, via the chat, ask your questions. That is via the chat function, present your questions. And if you are a reporter on Zoom, please find that chat function along with your questions, and please give us your name and your outlet. And our Director of Communications, Stephanie Montoya Mariski, will ask you that question and pose your question to the group. So I want to again thank Mayor Rex Richardson for leading this subject matter and being a spokesperson for the city on a subject matter that's extremely important, not just for Long Beach and Port of Long Beach, but for the nation. As you all are aware, this is the national headlines. And for that matter, let me just go one step further, the global community. Because if things don't move forward in a pragmatic way, it's going to affect the GDP, not only of the USA, but the global economy. The IMF has already indicated their prognosis or forecast early this year of 2.8% growth in global trade, and the economy of the GDP is now down to 1.8%. So with that, I'm going to turn this back over to the mayor, and let's prepare for Q&A. And again, we welcome your questions. So thank you so much for being here.
All right, thank you, Mario, and thank you for everyone joining us today. Business leaders, IBW, ILWU, laborers, Teamsters, we're all here, and we'll tell you, those numbers show you, we know how to do our job. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. The Port of Long Beach is a leader economically, and things are working. And we've seen record-breaking cargo month over month since October. And so we don't want to disturb that. We want to keep people working, keep food on the table, keep roofs over heads, and we want to continue serving America's economy. So are there any questions for us?
How has that impacted the Port of Long Beach? How is cargo down? Are ships not arriving? Ships out of China, are they sitting in the water? The latest on the supply chain. How has this impacted the port? Has it crippled the port to certain?
So what we'll do is I'll talk a little bit about it. Then I want to, we brought all these folks for a reason. I want you to hear firsthand from our dock workers and hear firsthand from the people who are on the front line. But yes, we have seen an impact. I was out earlier last week watching some of the last tariff-free ships come into our ports. We've seen cancel orders already take place. And think about what that does to our entire logistics and supply chain continuum. That means fewer people being called into work. That means fewer shifts that they can count on, fewer people, and it ripples not only from the docks, but to the warehouses and to the trucks and to all of that creates an economic impact with ground zero here in the city of Long Beach. And so yes, we've already begun to see the impacts here. We want to acknowledge the sort of reduction from 145 to 30, but some of this damage is already done. Right. So the threat of the 145% tariff this morning was there was another order with a recommendation of 30%. But let's be clear, this does not add more certainty for us. We need to understand what the conditions of trade are, because there are a number of companies and industries that will make plans based on what the framework of policy is. And so what we need is long range, stable policy. We have seen the impacts here in our port, and we stand in solidarity against disruptive, short-term policy making that impacts in the port. But I want to bring, with our initial analysis, we've seen 30% reduction we anticipate 30% reduction from record-breaking highs to seeing 30% reduction in our port and cancel orders is an immediate impact.
How long it'll take to get back up and running after this temporary agreement was made in terms of ships getting packed and then ships getting here? And then, sir, from the union, can you tell us how that will impact the union workers in terms of the temporary agreement?
Let's first of all, let's finish the question from earlier about what the impacts that you're beginning to see with your workforce. And then Mario will have you come in and talk about the data.
Well, thank you, sir, for the question. We've seen the impacts immediately. We're seeing less work opportunities for our workforce. Some that can work 5 days a week, maybe 6 when we're really working hard, to maybe 3, 4. So work opportunities are definitely have dropped for our workforce. For our part-time workers, there's absolutely 0 work opportunities for them. And that has been the hard part, is for the part-time workers. But even for our registered workforce, we're seeing less days available for them throughout the week.
Out there right now.
There's lots of empty cargo right now. We've been working with our executive directors to find space to move that. So if and when the cargo comes back, there's space, but there's empty containers out there and they're not going anywhere. They're being stored. I would say the uncertainty is definitely causing anxiety, is what we like to say. Anxiety among the workers, anxiety among the supply chain, not having that stability, not having that straight number of when things are going to happen, what type of cargo is going to be coming, which one is being tariffed, it's not. I think that the uncertainty is causing anxiety.
Smoothly. So I'm not trying to get into politics here as such, but it is what it is. So during the Biden administration, was the port running smoothly? And then when Trump steps in and talks about tariffs and it creates chaos? Things just went to hell or what?
Well, I would just say this. The facts are the facts. The work was here 2 months ago, 3 months ago. We were breaking records, as the mayor said, and our executive director. When you create some type of uncertainty through whatever policy you're trying to create, and there's no stability, it does create an issue, and which we're seeing today is why we're having this discussion, is to let the community at large know that this economic engine that we have here, 40% of the nation's cargo, creates so many job opportunities. And when you're seeing that cargo being stopped or being ship sailings being canceled, that's why we're here today to discuss what's happening to our economy, the lost work opportunities, our communities. So whether it's one administration to the other, what we're here today facing is based on some policy changes.
I said everyone needs to just suck it up. It's going to be okay, but not telling when it's going to be okay. You represent a lot of folks who need to work and can't work. They got to pay their mortgage. They got to pay other bills. What do you want to say to the President of the United States?
What I would want to say to the President of the United States is what I've been saying from day one. That whatever the policy that's going to come out of this, the men and women of the ILWU are going to be here to work tirelessly like we always have. That we are the frontliners. We see the economy in its peaks and its valleys. That's who we are. So I'm not going to allow anyone to believe that the men and women of the ILWU are not going to be resilient and work through this, because we have it. We've done it through the Great Depression. We've done it through the recession. We've done it through COVID. And the men and women of the ILWU are here to work, bring back the cargo, because we are the best at what we do. We break records. We just shown that, and we're here, and that's what we're here for. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to ask Mario to come in, just talk a little bit about what we've seen in terms of cancel orders and how abrupt, since the tariff conversation has taken place, how abrupt the drop off has been.
So thank you for the question. So let me give you a context so that you understand why the red flags are being raised. So in good times, year 2024, we had record cargo at the Port of Long Beach, 9.6 million, the best in our 113-year history. And as I've indicated earlier, first quarter 2025, Port of Long Beach moved the most container volume than any port in the country. In that period, you would see about 3 vessels at some of our container terminals. I'm talking about vessels at berth, loading and unloading. What happened last week? If you go back to approximately 5:10 p.m. Friday, with the latest report issued by the Marine Exchange. And those of you who may not be familiar, the Marine Exchanges are they're like your air traffic controllers at an airport. They see all the dynamics, what's coming, what's not coming. And the news on Friday was that for the 12 hours preceding that report, there were 0 vessels departing China. That is a big red flag. Why? Well, number one, China is the epicenter of manufacturing. Cargo moves consistently out of those ports. The ports in China are essentially 24/7. So to have a 12-hour period where there's no vessel departing from any Chinese port to the USA, that should be concerning. Probably one of the reasons why the meetings that were held this weekend in Geneva seem to have a glimmer of hope in terms of moving in a positive way. It's a lose-lose situation or a non-win situation for your country. Let me give you one last data. So I mentioned in good times, we have about 20 vessels who arrive at the Port of Long Beach on a given week. So the low point that we saw in the first week of May, that number was 14. So we went from 20 to 14. If this continues, that is why I think you're hearing that the potential of repeating what we witnessed in COVID, no products on the shelves, people losing their jobs. So I think the concerns are not just based on anecdotal commentary, it's based on hard data.
laws is back in effect?
A good question. So this interruption obviously has caused some, if you were interviewing me last week, I would have said radical uncertainty. I've eliminated the adjective, but we're still in an uncertain period. So we're still in an uncertainty type of mode. So if this gets resolved in a way that the shipper has confidence to not only book their cargo, but pay for the cargo to come out to the West Coast, at the very least, that takes 2 weeks right there. Now, to put the cargo on the vessel and for that vessel to depart any port of origin in China to the West Coast here at Long Beach, that will take approximately 14 days. So everything being equal, it would be about 30 days. But sometimes things happen in the supply chain process in terms of the bookings and loading that container at the port of origin. So it could be as much as 6 to 8 weeks. But hopefully everybody's ready. You've seen the energy here in terms of how we're looking forward to at least move in a positive way. So I would say in a good scenario, 4 weeks. In a bad scenario, 6 to 8 weeks. Well, I think I could answer that question better at the end of this week, because if you're a beneficial cargo owner or an importer, are you running now to book your cargo or giving instructions for that cargo that's in Asia now to come to the United States? Because keep in mind, particularly if you're a small or mid-sized shipper, that tariff right now is 30%, apparently. You still have to front that cost. So, and sometimes on the low value type of cargo, that's still a lot of money for the average shipper. So, I think the scenario here, and I'll pass this on to the mayor. The scenario here is what's also an issue is what happens on July 8th. Remember the reciprocal tariffs with all the other countries, like Vietnam, among the other 57 countries, that is a pause until July 8th. So what happens after July 8th? We don't know the answer to that question.
Just so we're clear, there is no certainty still today. Everything could change with a stroke of a pen on every single day. What we need is long-range trade policy. If you need to purchase a car seat, you need to know whether that is $100 or $245. That makes a big difference for folks. We do have a question online that we want to get to.
Sure, we have about 5 questions online that
Let's take the first one.
Okay, well, the first one concern is from Barron's, Adam Levine. He has a question about warehousing. So are you seeing an uptick in demand for bonded warehouses, and are more facilities looking to convert to bonded warehouses is his first part. And the second is, are you seeing more goods abandoned at the port? So some really detailed questions here.
All right, let's bring up Weston, chair of our Long Beach Economic Partnership. Talk a little bit about warehouses.
Yeah, hi, Weston LeBar. I'm the chair of the Long Beach Economic Partnership. I'm also chief strategy officer of Waterfront Logistics. We operate 600,000 square feet of warehousing next to the port. And we have a huge demand right now for bonded warehousing. And I think the thing that you have to keep in mind is there's different types of bonds, and you have to work through a very long and cumbersome process with Customs and Border Patrol. So our biggest fear in that process is that we may get permits. We're going through this process right now, right about the time they're not needed anymore. And if we permit our facility to be bonded and there's no bonded cargo, not only did we miss out on helping the shippers coming into the nation that are trying to navigate the trade war, but then we have a whole bunch of space that we can't use once it's been bonded if there's no bonded cargo. So there's a little bit of two ends to that right now for an operator, but I can tell you, if we bonded all 600,000 square feet of our warehousing, we would have 600,000 square feet of bonded cargo today.
Oh yeah, this is the Port of Long Beach. We know how to do our job. Next question.
And then we have another question from Cal Matters, Levi Samugsaise. He's asking, when do you expect the new lower tariffs on China to be reflected in possible increased traffic at the port? How long does it usually take businesses to make adjustments based on whenever there are changes to tariffs? So something we've answered before, but if we could just sort of review that, that
I
would be
think we have
great.
some folks in the business community. I would love to get their perspective on this. So Tracy or anyone you'd like to designate.
So to answer the part of the question is that when you ask about timing to react, did you hear the word said that you have to pay immediately? So there's this thing called cash flow, right? You have to have the money to make the investment, and then you have to have access to more money to make the investment. So sometimes timing is very much tied to that critical piece. It might be your desire to compete in your business to buy more and to buy it today when the price changes. But then it's your relationship with your lender, your how much cash do you have on hand, how quick can you turn that around? Lenders then go into certainty, right? And they need that relationship in turn. So it can be, I mean, not to be, unrealistic, it can turn in a minute. You saw the markets react in a minute today, and some people saying that was enough to move forward. They had been holding back, and now it goes from 145% with China to 30% for 90 days. Some people will move and act quick, and there will be a lot of volume that will be able to take place in that. Some, and then, it kind of depends. We're made up of a lot of mid-size and small business in California, which is our backbone, because then we have every single sector. We're not relying on just one sector over another, one industry over the other to survive. But then when you're mid-size and smaller, your relationship with cash to make purchases is more complicated and oftentimes adds more time. So that's not precise, but it's a reality check on what we're dealing with here.
I want to bring in Vince, who works works directly, is directly impacted in that way.
Thanks, Mayor Rex. Thank you, Mayor Rex. Vince Icapella, I'm head of strategy at Alba Wheels Up here in LA. Customs broker, freight forwarder on the front lines. My customers are importers and exporters. We've already seen a huge demand, even before the news, just on whispers of the news last week, that importers will front load, especially because we have this 90-day kind of reboot in 90 days. So they want to front load and get as much inventory as they can at 30%. As was previously mentioned by others in the group, it's a little harder to make longer term investments and sourcing decisions without the long-term certainty, but there is a short-term advantage. And look, we're in Long Beach, right? We have a really short transit time, trans-Pacific transit time from Asia to Long Beach. So you can pivot very quickly, especially if the goods are already manufactured. We can be here in 15 days, right? There are some questions out there. The executive order was released this morning, and experts all over the country are parsing it. There are some questions whether some of these might be retroactive, which is not decided yet. You might be able to go back on these duties. That's not 100% decided yet. But the short answer to this question is, I think we will see a surge similar to Q1 when we had that April 2 start date and customers were front loading, and we are in a short enough transit time on Transpac to see that. So I would expect that. Front loading means that I have to get the goods on the water, or actually, depending how defined, the goods have to leave Asia during this 90-day period to get the lower 30%. So you'll see a surge to beat the 90-day expiration. It's a rush. My name is Vince Icapella. I'm EVP of Growth and Strategy at Alba Wheels Up in Los Angeles. ALBA. My name? Oh, I have a name. I have every vowel of the alphabet in my last name. Vincent, IACO, P as in Peter, ELLA.
Sure.
If the uncertainty continues, things are going to get uglier and uglier at the port, or we're going to muscle through this? What do you want our viewers to know?
Thank you. Last week, what we said was we're sounding the alarm. This is important. People count on the port and they don't know it. They just know they click and buy and it shows up. They have no idea how these decisions impact their ability to provide the basic needs for their family. And so the point of today is demonstrating the economic impact. This is real. These are real numbers. These are jobs. This is economic impact, but also sounding the alarm that we all should be concerned about trade policy and tariffs, because they will have an impact on your ability to procure goods and how much those goods cost. We have just a couple more. We're going to get through those and then we're going to wrap it.
So ABC News has a question from Sue Yoon. She's asking, can you confirm that last week was the first week goods from China paid the 145% tariffs increase, and were they unloaded? She's also asking, are those companies who paid the 145% tariffs last week, do we know who they are, and what does that do for their goods?
So the answer to that question is, as of the week of April 27th, we started seeing the vessels that arrived here to Port of Long Beach would be subject, that cargo, to the 145% tax, which is the reason why it's diminished. And the reason that I indicated that at one of our terminals where you had ordinarily 3 vessels, one day there was 0. The next day there was 1. So there's a lot of vessels out there, whether they're just in between China and USA or have not departed. And I think everybody's waiting to see what's that number. They want
What is that
certainty.
number? What are those goods? Do we know? Can we say whether they were soybeans?
Electronics, furniture, I mean, you name it. Keep in mind that we're approaching peak season. So when you talk about holidays, toys, 80% of the toys in this country are manufactured in China. So whether it's a doll or anything else, you're kind of a little bit nervous as to whether you're going to pay 145% tax or is it 30%. So there's still, like, as the mayor indicated, a lot of uncertainty that again has to be cleared.
And then before we wrap it up for our Spanish stations, Telemundo specifically, who's online, but there are some others, can you address in Spanish, sort of wrap it up for us? Tell us about the dangers, tell us about the risks. Noel, if you would take that, that would be.
Introduce the CEO of Port of Long Beach, Dr. Noel Hasegawa.
Thank you very much. Buenos días. Bueno, para poder darles un resumen de todo lo que han escuchado, presentemente el puerto de Long Beach anuncia las cifras más recientes acerca del impacto económico positivo. Y las cifras nos dan a entender que hay más de 2 millones de empleos que son creados, impulsados por la actividad aquí en el puerto de Long Beach. Atrás de mí está nuestro alcalde, la dirección del puerto de Long Beach y también la comunidad portuaria, que comprime a los esquivadores, los que conducen los camiones, los barcos, los trenes, y un número de uniones que traen el trabajo, la mano de obra que hace posible este impulso de cargamento. Presentemente estamos navegando un asunto que nunca hemos visto. Los aranceles que se han anunciado han creado mucha incertidumbre, y lo que estamos animando a nuestro gobierno federal es que necesitamos certidumbre, necesitamos claridad para que todos nuestros miembros de la comunidad portuaria podamos hacer nuestro trabajo. Queremos seguir impulsando empleos, queremos seguir impulsando actividad económica para que todos los beneficios de la actividad portuaria sigan creando los empleos. Muchas gracias.
These are our leadership here. But thank you all for joining us. This will be available online as well. This concludes our press conference. Thank you so much.